Part 2, Section 2 of the Autobiography of Cockney Tom. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jennifer Dion. The Autobiography of Cockney Tom by Thomas Bastard. Part 2, Section 2. Got up late the next morning and took a walk through Kyneton, which was the best-looking town we had seen out of Melbourne. There were 3 good hotels, several stores, drapers, watchmaker, tailors, shoemakers, and butchers and bakers. Lots of diggers were returning who had made their pile, and others going to try to make theirs. Of course, we were amongst the latter. After sundry refreshments, we went into committee to consider what was to be done next. We all agreed that a day's spell would do us a deal of good, and that we should be all the better prepared for gold digging afterwards. We were then only 12 or 14 miles from Forest Creek, and I proposed looking for fresh lodgings, as the house we were staying at was anything but respectable. This was agreed to, and we searched and were successful in finding good beds, food and liquors, and plenty of company. "This will do," said I. "We must make some money here." "How?" said Fiddler Jim. "The same as at the Forest Inn," replied I. "At any rate we can but try," said Plumber George. "I am good to keep the door and repair their beer engine, if through being overworked it should happen to get out of order." "Well, I'll see what's best to be done," said I. "In the meantime you have a rest till I come back." I went into the kitchen and saw the girls. "I beg your pardon," said I to one of them, "but will you inform me if you have a room large enough for a dance?" "Oh, yes, we use the lodge room when we have a ball, and Mrs. Halliday is very fond of a dance. She will be so pleased, so by all means go and see her at once, and let us know when it is to take place. Plenty of people will be glad to come, I am sure," said the girl, and so off I went to see Mrs. Halliday. "Are you musicians?" asked she. "My mate plays, and I am a London concert singer. Will you give us an engagement?" said I. "No," said she, "I will not do that. But you can have the use of our club room for nothing, and you can charge what you like for admission." I told her that at the Forest Inn the landlord found us in board and lodging. "Very well, then," said she, "I will do the same. When do you propose to commence?" "Tonight," said I. "Then," said she, "I'll tell the ostler to light up the room and get your stage ready." I had a nobbler, and returned to my mates and found them asleep. "Wake up," said I, "there's business to be done." "What's up?" said Fiddler Jim. "Anything fresh?" asked Plumber George. "Yes," said I, telling them all about my arrangements. "What's to be done first?" said I. "We must get a large piece of cardboard, and write on it in large letters, 'A grand ball and concert will take place here tonight. Admission 2 shillings, to commence at 8 sharp. Cockney Tom, manager.'" The remainder of the day was spent going about informing the inhabitants what a treat was in store for them. You must know that Fiddler Jim and myself had brought with us an old dress coat each, and black trousers and white waistcoat, all the worse for wear. These, and my coats and other rags for caricature business, and the fiddle, comprised our professional stock in trade. 8 o'clock came, and the folks began to muster. Plumber George was at the door, taking the 2 shillings, which I thought was little less than a robbery, but I had agreed to do it. They commenced the same programme as at the Forest Inn, and all went off well. The interval as before, and drinks all round. Everybody was eager for the dance. Off they went. Mrs. Halliday came in. She was a Scotch lassie, and couldn't keep her feet quiet while the reel of Telegram was being played. She rushed into the room and began to twist and twirl about like an eel till she nearly fainted. They kept it up late, and we promised to repeat the entertainment the next night with a slight change in the programme. We thanked the company and retired to our room, counted the cash, and found we had taken £8. "It's not bad," said Fiddler Jim. "Let's have another nobbler before we go to bed," said Plumber George. "All right," rejoined I. The next day we took a long walk, and found good farming country around Kyneton. Home to dinner, everything going right. Rested in the afternoon, and then got ready for concert and ball No. 2. The place was not rushed the second night, but we nevertheless added £4 more to our treasury. After a good night's rest, we got up and prepared to start, and bid good-bye to the landlady, the servants, and the town of Kyneton. We had about 12 or 14 miles to walk to the great forest diggings that had given me the fever in London. We stopped at Sawpit Gully and had a rest and beer, 6 miles more, and then we saw what is not easily forgotten. We arrived safely at the creek, and were astonished to see the number of tents, the thousands at work, men, women, girls, and boys of all ages, and the deep holes nearly frightened me. When the diggers saw us, they began to shout, "Joe! Joe!" which was responded to all round the diggings. It was a saying or cry they had. When the police went round to examine their licenses, I and my party walked on, taking observations, when all at once someone called out, "Is that you, Plumber George?" "Yes," said he, "all that remains of me since I left London." "What do you think of the diggings?" said Mr. Postman. We had better call him by that name, for after he left the diggings he came back to Adelaide and got an appointment as mail guard, which he held for 20 years. He is alive now and has retired, or is about to retire, from the service an independent man. Once he was a poor tailor in London. "How long have you been here?" said Postman. "Just arrived," said we. "Have you had any dinner?" "What did you say?" "Have you had any dinner?" "No," said I, "we have only just arrived." "You shall dine with me in my tent, and I'll give you a shake-down tonight," said he. "Thanks," said I. "My mates," said Mr. Postman, "are out prospecting, and I don't expect them back for a day or two. In the meantime, I will tell you a thing or two about the goldfields. Come with me to my butcher's." The butcher's shop was a tent, with 2 or 3 sheep hanging up, also some sausages. "A quarter of mutton," said Postman. "All right," said Butcher. "We expect to have half of a bullock next week." "These are some friends of mine from Adelaide. You may safely trust them if they get hard up," said Postman. "They can have what they like on your recommendation." We arrived at his tent and soon made a fire. "How are you going to cook?" asked Fiddler Jim. "You shall soon see," said Postman. Whereupon he got a tin bucket, washed it out, put water in, slung it over the fire, cut off the leg of mutton, and in that went. After that, flour was made into hard dumplings, potatoes, onions, and oatmeal all went in the same bucket that was used for getting out the gold dirt from the holes. Then Mr. Postman proposed that we should go with him to Johnny Allsort's store and get some beer while the dinner was cooking, to which we all agreed. Mr. Postman gave us a hint that we had better look out for the holes, or we might find ourselves in a bath. As we walked along, Mr. Postman endeavored to enlighten us by explaining the names, etc., of the various claims within view. Where we then were was called Pennyweight Flat. On our right is Moonlit Flat. Then over there is Long Gully. That hill on the left is called Adelaide Hill, and the next is Friar's Creek. Then further on is Campbell's Creek, and then comes Murder Creek, which takes you on to Tarrangower. We arrived at Johnny Allsort's and had 2 bottles of beer, for which we paid 8 shillings. We were introduced to Johnny as new arrivals. He had made his fortune by selling to new chums such articles as tents, cradles, buckets, tubs, and frying pans. In fact, he could supply anything except gold dust, which he bought, or exchanged for tea, sugar, or grog. We arranged to call the next morning and do business with him. Got back safely and enjoyed our dinner, after which we had a long yarn about digging, followed by a song. Some neighbors came in, and Jim tuned out his fiddle and played a bit, after which we had some grog, fired off our pistols, reloaded them, made up the fire, and then turned into our blankets with our firearms under our pillows. I slept well till daylight, when I got up and made a fire, put on the billy, and had breakfast. We then gave Johnny Allsort's another call, all of us going together. Mr. Postman accompanied us to see that we were not imposed upon. Johnny greeted us with, "How are you this morning? Will you take a nobbler?" "After business," said I. "Good," said Mr. Postman. "Now then," said Allsorts, "what is the first thing?" "A good warm tent," said Fiddler Jim. "I can accommodate you to a T. I have one not far off that I bought off 3 diggers who went to the New Rush. Come with me and you shall see it, and then judge for yourself." We all went to look at it, and found it to be a good second-hand tent. "It's dirt cheap at £5," said Johnny Allsorts. "Too much," said Mr. Postman. "If it was offered to you tomorrow, you would not give any more than £2 for it." "Well, we will not quarrel about £1," said he. "It is yours for 4." "All right," said the lot of us. Mr. Postman selected what we should want to begin with, such as a cradle, buckets, rope picks, shovels, dishes, a camp oven, flour, potatoes, onions, matches, etc. When the account was made up, we had not enough to pay it, so Johnny said, "Never mind the balance now. If you are lucky, come and pay, and in the meantime give me your names for the account, so that if you have to leave I may have a claim on the tent." We consulted together and agreed to his terms. We then had nobblers all round, took possession of our goods, and moved into our new tent. We arranged that Plumber George was to be cook for the first week, and the first thing that he had to do was to chop a tree down, but Fiddler Jim, however, had to help him. I went off to the butcher's shop and got credit for a quarter of mutton, and when I got back they had lighted a fire, so I fried some mutton, boiled some potatoes, and had dinner, after which we went into committee. "What's the first thing to be done?" asked George. "We must take out our license before we begin to dig," said Jim. "Ah," said I forgot that. "We shall have to pay £3 for it." "And I should like to know where the money is to come from," said Fiddler Jim. "I'll try my friend Mr. Postman," said George. He did so, and got it. We then took a walk to the commissioner's tent, and got our licenses, after which we had a good look over the township, which was called Castlemaine, and is so called to this day. Its original name, however, was Mount Alexander. We returned and marked out our claim near a spot where we were told lots of gold had been found. As it rained heavily, we agreed not to start work until the next day, so we returned to our tent and wrote letters, informing the folks at home of our safe arrival. Got to work next day, and took it in turns, one to use the pick and the other the shovel. We got down about 4 feet the first day, and were very tired. Our hands, not being used to pick and shovel work, were very sore. The next day we expected to bottom the hole. The diggers told us that we should strike the pipe clay at about 7 feet. The deeper we went, the labor of getting the stuff to the surface was increased, as every bit had to be drawn up in buckets. The third day we got to the pipe clay, under which was found a small deposit of gravel. We hauled it up very carefully for fear of losing any, and we put it through the cradle, as we had seen the others do, after which we washed it in a tin dish, and then at the bottom of it we found some very fine specks of gold, about 2 pennyweights, valued at about 7 shillings, and this was the glorious result of 3 days at the diggings, a splendid sum to divide among 3 men. It is needless to say that we were disheartened, and Jim the fiddler was affected almost to tears. As it was a moonlight night, I suggested a walk into town, and we went, and it was not altogether unprofitable, for I fell in with a man of the name of Ashton, whom I had known in Adelaide, where he had been Crown Lands Ranger. His father was proprietor of a large establishment known as Ashton's Hotel, and he had many acquaintances, but I only had the pleasure of his son's friendship. "Ah, my boy," said he, "how do you get on? Come to try your luck?" "Yes," said Jim, "but it has only been bad luck as yet." "You must not despair," said Ashton. "Come and take a nobbler with me." Not one of us refused. We all went to the Albert Hotel, and had 2 nobblers each. The landlord could see that we were new chums, as he had come from London himself, so he told us, and had made money by digging, and had invested it in the Albert Hotel. "What trade are you?" he asked. "My mates are both tradesmen. One is a plumber, and the other is a painter," I replied. "And what are you?" said he. "Why, I am a professional singer from London." "You'd do well if you had some music with you," said he. "Why, one of my mates is a first-class fiddler," said I. "Humph," said he. "Come down tonight, and we will see what we can do for you. At any rate, I will give you something to start with." We bade our friend good-bye, and promised him that if we made a change, we would go to his place at Tarrangower. We returned to our tent and had tea. Then we took the fiddle and went to our first engagement on Forest Creek, for which we received about 17 shillings and a bottle of brandy. We were to play and sing every night there, unless we had other engagements. We were next told that we should do much better if we worked in the creek, as many were doing very well there, so we gave that a trial, and found it much easier and much more profitable than sinking holes. We got several nice nuggets of gold there, and what with gold digging, fiddling, and singing, we soon paid Johnny Allsorts and Mr. Postman what we owed them, and more than that, for we soon got up our names as Jim the fiddler and Tom the singer, and we were engaged to play at a grand cricketing dinner to celebrate a match between 11 Castlemaine players and 11 from Bendigo. There I sang the Gold Digger's song, the chorus of which was as follows: "Merely ply the pick and spade, and rock the cradle fast. Here we pursue no idle trade, for we may be rich at last," which was greatly appreciated, much to the satisfaction of myself and Fiddler Jim. We stopped there that night, but there was no sleep, as they all got drunk. Champagne was the order, not of the day, but of the night, and a general scrimmage with pillows and bolsters flying about, and such like, was carried on till daylight in the morning. Things went on with us pretty well for several weeks. Our gold digging averaged about half an ounce per day, which was not so bad had it lasted, but bad weather set in, and a lot of rain falling the creek was flooded, so we had to work up to our hips in water, and Plumber George was soon taken bad and could not work. When the mail came in, I and Jim went to the post office to see if there were any letters for us. After waiting about 2 hours, we got our letters, one for George, one for Jim, one for Mr. Postman, and one for me also. We returned to our tent, and then went over to Mr. Postman, who read his letters to us, which was to the effect that his only child was dying, and that if he wanted to see it before it died, he must return at once. He was not long in making up his mind. "I'm off," he said, "to Adelaide tomorrow morning, and leave everything to my mates to settle. I have made a little gold, and if all goes well, I'll come back and make some more." When we told George the plumber that Mr. Postman was off to Adelaide, he said, "I'll be off with him, for I am sick of gold digging. This kind of life may suit you who can make money by singing and playing, but it don't suit me at all. And another thing, I want to get home to my wife, as I am quite sure this life don't agree with me." We gave him a fair share of what we possessed, and the next morning saw Mr. Postman and Plumber George off to Adelaide. Of course, we gave them several commissions, which they faithfully executed. We only remained a short time on Forest Creek after our mates had gone. Truly, we lived a fiddling kind of life, for the violin and singing was now our principal support, and strange were the scenes we were obliged to witness. One night, after playing and singing at the Albert Hotel, we were just about to leave when we saw one of the traps, as they were called on the diggings, and which means no more nor less than policemen in plain clothes. I saw that he had his eyes on someone, so we thought we would watch and see what was up, and we had not long to wait. A poor drunken digger, who had been shouting to everybody, came out of the Albert Hotel, and strange to say, the very man who ought to have taken him in charge for being drunk, and have protected him from robbery, knocked him down with his staff, knelt on him, and robbed him of all he possessed, and then left him on the ground to die if he liked. And what is worse to relate, it was more than your life was worth to utter a word against this shameful proceeding. Such was the state of society in those days on the goldfields. Not far from us there lived 2 men given out to be diggers. We thought that they were, but we soon found out our mistake. They wormed themselves into our company at every opportunity, and were uncommonly civil. I could see that these men were no good, and found out that they got their living by sly grog selling, cheating at cards, or any other little game. As we could not get rid of them, our only course was to leave Forest Creek as quietly as possible. We did so, and meeting with some new chums who had come to try their fortune, we sold them our tent, furniture, and stock in trade at a loss, but which was better after all than selling them to Johnny Allsorts, and off we started next morning for Tarrangower, a distance of only 15 miles. We had to go through Campbell's and Friar's Creeks, Dead Man's Gully, Murder Flat, and at all these places the gold fever was raging. We passed through without much chaff. Now and then, "There goes Fiddler Jim and Singing Tom," would be called after us from the creek, but we took no heed and went on our way as fast as we could. After walking about 10 miles, we came to a small township called Mucklesford, which lay in a beautiful valley and reminded me of my song, "Give me a cot in the valley I love." The cottages were all built of wood, with neat little gardens around them, and a creek of beautiful water ran through the township, which contained 2 stores, 1 public house, and a smith's and shoemaker's shops. I had a chat with the disciple of St. Crispian, and found him to be an old hand from the other side. We inquired about how they got their living, and he informed us that most of them grew vegetables and supplied the diggers. We asked him to have a drink with us, which he did not refuse, when to our surprise the 2 men we were in dread of confronted and upbraided us for not telling them that we were going to Tarrangower. They knew where the new rush was, and would like to chum in with us, they said. We told them that we had a friend there where we intended to stay, but they would not be put off, and determined to keep us company, to protect us in case of our meeting bushrangers. They asked us many questions, such as, "You must have made a lot of money at the creek with your playing and singing." I told them we had made very little indeed, and what we had got we had sent home to our wives in Adelaide. We were very civil to these strangers, for it was no use being otherwise, as they were well armed and not particular. After a long walk we arrived at Tarrangower at dark, completely knocked up. Fiddler Jim said he had never walked such a long 15 miles in his life. It seemed to him more like 30. I soon found out my friend Ashton, who was glad to see us. We shouted to the men who had kept us company, and bade them good night. "All right," said they, "we will see you in the morning." I told Ashton about these men. "Oh, I know them," said he. "They are the biggest rogues and thieves on the diggings, and one has been tried for murder. Keep out of their company." We thanked Ashton for his advice. As he could not furnish us with lodgings, he took us to a friend who kept a large saloon. He undertook to give us a shakedown for 3 shillings each. About 30 of us slept in one large tent on boards with just a mattress laid on them, every man finding his own blankets. We slept pretty well, and got up early, took a walk round the township, which was called Malden, on account of a man of that name owning a lot of land in that district. It had formerly been known as Bryant's Ranges. This Bryant was a sheep farmer, and had made a large fortune when the diggings were first started, by supplying the diggers with mutton. We had breakfast, and called on Ashton, who said, "I am glad you have turned up, as I have got you an engagement with my neighbour that keeps the National Hall. He wants someone that is likely to draw well, so I will go and introduce you to him. He is a black man, but not a bad sort." We found his words true. Jim requested me to make the engagements, as I was a better general at that sort of thing than he was himself. So to oblige him, I engaged myself and Fiddler Jim to a black man for 3 months, at a salary of £3 per week each, and what money we could collect, with board and lodging, and with the full right to dig in the daytime. The agreement being duly signed and witnessed, we cracked a bottle of wine over it, which, by the way, was not very good. Our first night was not such a great success as we had anticipated it to be. We got our bills out, but the people did not show up at first, which was to be accounted for by the fact that a week before we arrived there had been a company of minstrels known as Rayner's New York Niggers playing there, who had done well and then gone on to Bendigo. We had a miserable attendance to begin with, but as the evening advanced the company increased, and at the end of the first part I made a speech to the effect that there would be a change of programme every evening, and dancing would commence at 9 o'clock and close at 11. Also that there was to be no charge for admission, but that they were to give what they liked to the musicians. "Now," said I, "take your places for the first dance." "Let's have a Scotch reel," said one digger. "Good," said another, and off they started. Presently more company arrived, and in came Ashton and his friends, and they all began to dance. Fiddler Jim kept them close at it. Ashton went round with his hat and collected £3 the first time. He repeated it again and got nearly as much more. At the finish we all went to Ashton's tent, and every one of us got more or less the worse for drunk. We found out afterwards that Ashton and our master the black man were working together in more ways than one. Next day we had a look round the diggings, and it was a grand sight to see so many hills and gullies covered with tents of all sorts, and occupied by people of all nations. We now purchased a new set of diggers' tools, hearing that a new rush had taken place at Long Gully, a place about 2 miles from Maryborough. We did a fair business at the Hall on our second night, for the ladies put in an appearance in good force, and we felt certain the men would soon follow. The next morning we were off to the new rush. We had to pass through a lot of bush country, and as there were no tracks we lost our way, but after a long time fell in with a digger who set us right again, and got to our destination about the middle of the day. We marked out our claim close to the spot where we were told they had struck gold, and as we had to get back to the Hall in time for dinner, we had no time to try our luck that day. We still heard reports that lots of gold had been found near our claim, so next morning early off we went and got to work. We sank about 4 feet and got no gold. Our neighbours in the next claim got down to the pipe clay and struck a small patch of gold, about 2 pennyweights, which gave them courage to persevere, and the next day we bottomed, scraped up the wash dirt, and carried it home to wash, there being no water nearer than 3 miles, and of course we were very anxious to see what gold we had got, and so washed it very carefully, and found we had about half an ounce, and a few grains of nuggety gold, which we considered not so bad a result. The next day Jim was unwell and could not work, so I went to the claim alone. Imagine my surprise when I find the man I most wanted to avoid coolly working our claim and getting gold. "Hello," said he. "I heard this was your claim, and that you were going to give it up as a duffer. I'll go in with you. My tent is close by, and I shall be on the spot to see that no one jumps the claim." I said that I would speak to my mate and give him an answer the next day, so he went to work, and I shared the gold with him, which we sold at a store for £2. When I got home I found Jim much better, and I told him about our Forest Creek friend, which rather frightened him. "You will have to watch him pretty closely," said he. I don't know what else you could do than keep in with him, so keep on digging, and I will be about and keep my eyes open, for you know I myself am not much good at digging." Fiddler Jim was right. He did not like the pick and spade. Things went on very well, as we thought, but an old man who worked in the same hole to us quietly said to me, "Where did you pick up with your mate?" I told him in confidence all I knew about him. "I know him," said he. "I came from Sydney. That's where I met him. There has been a lot of tents robbed, and a store down in the gully was stuck up last night, and this cove is one of the mob suspected." "Be careful, my boy," continued the old Sydney man. "I have been on the diggings for 4 years, and have made very little gold, but what little I do get I send to my poor daughter, who is in Sydney." After that I began to like the old man very much. In the afternoon of that day I heard a great noise and a voice shouting, "A fight! A fight!" I got out of the hole to see what was up, and sure enough there were 2 men stripped and a mob of blackguards backing them up. I thought I would go and have a look on, but the crime carried the punishment, for I tumbled down a hole and nearly broke my arm. I afterwards ascertained that the men had quarrelled about a claim, and to settle the dispute they determined upon a fight, and the best man was to have it. The fight lasted nearly 2 hours, when they both were taken to their tents. The losing man could not work for a week after, and the winning man was more than a fortnight getting round. So much for fighting. This took place on a Friday, and the next day my new acquaintance came to my hole while I was at work, and said in a whisper, "Are you by yourself?" "Yes," said I. "My mate has gone to a store to get a nobbler." "Then come up," said he. I did so, and after the old man had a look round to make sure he was not being watched, he unrolled a dirty old coloured handkerchief. "Look at that, my boy. I have been looking after this for 4 years, and now I am off to my dear child in Sydney, and I shall never see you again. Don't tell anyone about my luck." And as he spoke he showed me a lump of gold in quartz as big as a pint pot. It must have weighed 8 or 10 pounds. He had just struck it with his pick in a corner of his claim. He went away very quietly, and I never saw him afterwards. We worked hard there for some time after that, but there were no great nuggets for us. It so happened one day that a man, whom I knew by sight, called to me, "I say, Tom, I can lay you on to a real good thing, and it's not to everyone I would do so, but as I know you, I give you the first chance. It is this. I have received a letter from my sister, stating that my mother is dangerously ill, and that I must go to Melbourne as quickly as I can. Now this claim of mine is very rich, and if you like to give me a 5-pound note, you can take my claim and work it out. You will get gold enough to pay you back in 1 day. To convince you," said he, "just come down and judge for yourself." I went with him, and he began to pick away and to examine the stuff. I looked on with astonishment, as there was no mistake about it. There was gold in every shovelful of dirt taken up. I said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you 4 pounds and chance it." "Well, as I want to get away," said he, "I will take it." When I told my mates what a bargain I had struck, my Forest Creek mate remarked, "You have been nicely got at. That fellow gets his living that way. You bet the hole was prepared." "What's that?" said I. "Why, he planted the gold there himself to deceive you." I could hardly believe it, but alas! it turned out to be too true. I now began to have a very bad opinion of myself, as not being so smart a man as I had thought. A day or 2 afterwards, while a poor fellow was working in his hole, which was not very far from my claim, and where, by the by, I was getting nothing, a cry arose that the earth had given way and buried him. Everybody was ready to lend a hand to dig him out, but when they recovered him he was quite dead. This sad event put a stop to work that day, and I and Fiddler Jim resolved to leave the long gully and work nearer the hall. So a day or 2 afterwards we told our Forest Creek mate what we were going to do, and to our surprise he was quite agreeable, remarking that he wanted a change himself. "But," said he, "we may meet again. I didn't like you chaps at first, but I don't know how it is, I have taken a great liking to you all at once, so we will have a drink together before we part," which we did, and felt relieved of a companion who had kept us both in fear. We next went to work in German Gully, but got very little gold. We left there, and went to work at Chinaman's Flat, and there did nothing at all. Then we tried our luck at Sailor's Gully and Spearmint Hill, and got a little gold, but not enough to pay, as it cost us 10 shillings for a load of water to wash the stuff we dug up. The professional business at the hall now began to flag, and we found out that the black man was very much in debt, and consequently we could not get our salary. We went into council with Ashton, and he advised us to stay and work up a benefit. He informed us that a digger's ball was to take place, and that we might get the job to work it up. End of Part 2, Section 2.